Okay, it's 3:30, so let us return to our uh, lesson. So, review on radiobiology part 2. Okay. So, deterministic effects. So, before we proceed to that, so what is probabilistic effect and non-probabilistic effect? Okay. Can anyone differentiate probabilistic effect from non-probabilistic effect? No, nakabalik na ba kayo? Fourth year, are you there? Hindi yata ako naririnig. So, andyan na ba kayo, fourth year? So, can anyone answer my question? Okay, wala. Sige. Kung wala, di let us proceed. The deterministic effect of radiation. So, early effects of radiation. A radiation response in human within a few days to months. Okay? It is described as deterministic. Okay? So, deterministic radiation response, same as early effects of radiation, is a biologic response whose severity varies with radiation dose. So, in deterministic radiation dose response, a dose threshold exists. So, meaning there is a specific maximum dose needed before a particular biologic effect manifests. Okay. So kaya siya tinawag na deterministic because the threshold determines the manifestation of a biologic effect. Okay? So under the deterministic and early uh, effects of radiation is what we call the acute radiation lethality or acute radiation syndrome. So, syempre, death, the most devastating human response to radiation exposure. Because there are different human responses to, or biological responses to uh, radiation, and the most severe of all the effects or human responses is death. Okay, the the cessation of life. Okay, acute radiation induced lethality. So it is only academic interest in diagnostic radiology. Bakit? Kasi in reality, uh, there is acute radiation-induced lethality cannot occur in diagnostic radiology or in medical imaging because of the dose, the radiation dose that we are using. Usually, acute radiation-induced lethality occurs in industrial uh, use of radiation or nuclear energy industry. Okay? So doon lang siya nagmamanifest. But sabi nga dito, it is only of academic interest. For academic interest that we discuss acute radiation induced lethality. Okay? So these are the principal effects, okay, of radiation exposure on human and the approximate threshold. So let's say full body, okay, so you need to have a dose equivalent or more than 200 rad or 2 gray in a single exposure. Okay, that is the dose threshold, and the effect is death. Okay, for the hematologic depression or hematologic syndrome, okay, the whole body again is the anatomic site. So you need to have a dose threshold of 25 rad or 200 milligray. For skin erythema, so small field of the skin, okay, so you need 200 rad or 2 gray. So again, yung kailangan tingnan natin mabuti yung anatomic site. So though pareha sila ng threshold with depth, 200 rad or 2 gray, but the anatomic side or the field of exposure or the region of interest is different. Whole body versus small field area. Okay? Then epilation or hair loss, small field also, the anatomic side. Then it is greater 300 rad or 3 gray. Then chromosome aberration, so whole body. Okay? So chromosome aberration, so nasa DNA ang DNA irradiation. Okay? So that needs a dose threshold of 5 rad or 50 milligray. Then gonadal dysfunction, either temporary sterility or any dysfunction in the gonads. So local tissue, 10 rad is the threshold dose or 100 milligray. Okay, so as you can see, uh, the smaller the field or the smaller the area or region of interest, okay, the greater the radiation threshold can be attributed to. Okay. But the greater the body, so the greater the threshold. However, it still depends on what kind of effect the body manifests. Okay. So here are some of the uh, early effects okay, and their threshold dose. Okay? So again, this is on single exposure. Hindi siya multiple exposure, single exposure only. So, whole body exposure to radiation in a single time at nag-reach siya ng 200 rad, it can cause death. Okay? It can cause skin redness kung na-expose ang small field sa small area ng skin with 200 rad or 2 gray threshold dose. So yan, single exposure only. Okay? So diagnostic X-ray beams always result in partial body exposure, okay, which is less harmful than whole body exposure. Bakit half body exposure only? Because of the term, ano yung term na ginagamit natin? Attenuation. Okay? Some of the X-rays are absorbed by the body, and some of the X-rays, those who have high energy, just pass through the body. Okay? Okay. So before we discuss further these effects of radiation to the human body, we should revisit uh, historical incidents of radiation accidents. Okay, so first is the Chernobyl accident or incident. So in 1986, okay, the Chernobyl incident happened. Okay, according to sources, so kaya daw nagkaroon ng aksidente sa Chernobyl. Okay, so Chernobyl is located in the then USSR or Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Okay, so dahil daw sa uh, flawed reactor nito. Flawed yung design ng nuclear reactor. Okay, dahil sa may hindi tamang design doon sa nuclear reactor, nagkaroon tuloy ng nuclear meltdown. Okay? Nagkaroon ng yung isang reactor core ay sumabog. At nagkaroon ng meltdown. Okay? So dahil sa nangyari, at least 5% of the radioactive reactor core ay napunta sa environment. With the deposition of radioactive materials in many parts of Europe. Kasi when the explosion happened in Chernobyl, okay, nagkaroon ng fallout, ng radioactive fallout. Okay. And this radioactive fallout can be spread through into the wide range of miles and kilometers. So sa halos buong Europe ay nagkaroon ng fallout. And syempre, kung gagamitin natin yung inverse square law, okay, mas malapit doon sa pinangyarihan ng event, mas mataas yung radiation dose na makukuha ng mga tao. Okay? So, yeah. So, ang nangyari doon sa incident, dalawang Chernobyl plant workers died due to the explosion on the night of the accident. Okay, so yun pa lang, yung fatality, dalawa. But Another 28 people died within a few weeks as a result of the ARS or Acute Radiation Syndrome. And these 28 people will be followed by several more. And of course, those people who have been born with genetic problems. Okay? Ayan. So the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effect of Atomic Radiation has concluded that apart from 5,000 thyroid cancers with 15 fatalities, okay, wala daw major evidence, okay, of public health impact attributed to radiation exposure 20 years after the accident. However, okay, 350,000 people were evacuated as a result of the Chernobyl incident. Okay? Kasi yung yung lupa, tubig, lahat ng bagay within the certain kilometer radius sa Chernobyl ay radioactive. Okay. In fact, nitong siguro mga 2 to 3 years ago, nakakita ko sa Facebook na post regarding Chernobyl. Yung tubig daw na galing sa Chernobyl ay gagawing vodka. So, I don't know how safe it is, but they are pricing it at a very high price. So, ayun. Sabi nung iba, safe na daw sa Chernobyl, but there are still others who are saying that we need to wait for several more years before Chernobyl can be occupied by people again. Okay? Then we have the 3 Mile Island incident. Okay, so this 3 Mile Island incident ay nangyari sa Middletown, Pennsylvania sa US. Okay? So, sabi dito, it is the most serious accident in US commercial nuclear power plant in the history. Although its small radioactive releases had no detectable effects on plant workers or the public, general public. Okay. So, nagkaroon din ng nuclear reactor meltdown. So, yun nga lang dito, sa 3 Mile incident ay partial meltdown. Nangyari ito noong 1979. So, earlier than the Chernobyl incident. So, anong naging impact or effect ng 3 Mile Island incident? So, dahil sa nangyari, okay, the US Nuclear Regulation Commission ay naghigpit sa kanilang regulatory function sa pagre-regulate ng mga nuclear power plant. Okay, so sabi nga dito, its aftermath brought about the sweeping changes in emergency response planning, reactor operating training, human factors engineering, radiation protection, and many other areas of nuclear power plant operation. So, yan yung dalawa sa mga incident, okay, na nag-contribute sa pag-determine ng mga responses ng human responses to radiation, human responses to the interaction with radiation at the same time, yung mga human processes on which uh, we address the problem about uh, certain accidents involving nuclear reactors. Okay, so ARS or Acute Radiation Syndrome. So it is a radiation sickness that occurs in the human after whole body dose or whole body exposure of 1 gray or 100 rad or more ionizing radiation delivered over a short period of time. And delivered over a short period of time, again it is single dose. Isang single na exposure lang. Ibig sabihin niyang over a short period of time, continuous uh, continuous yung kanyang exposure sa radiation. Okay, so under the ARS, we have three syndromes. The hematologic death syndrome, the gastrointestinal death syndrome, and the central nervous system syndrome. Okay. Okay. So each of the syndromes, we will be discussing about the different stages. May mga different stages kasi. Okay. The prodromal period. Okay. So yung makikita mo dito, ito yung summary ng acute radiation lethality. Okay. May mga period siya, actual period siya, yung tatlong syndrome. Pero each of the syndrome, mayroong prodromal, latent, and manifest stages. Okay? So dito pinapakita uh, yung sa mismong acute radiation syndrome. Okay? So prodromal syndrome, yan. So less than 1 gray. Okay? So ang kanyang signs and symptoms ay nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Then latent period, 1 to 100 gray ang kanyang dose. Okay? Mean survival time in days. So walang naka-indicate. So wala. Kasi latent period siya. Diba? When we say latent, usually ito yung calm. Ito yung hindi pa nagpa-manifest. Diba? Kaya nga yung sa film screen, diba, we have the latent image. Next is the hematologic syndrome or hematologic death. So 2 to 10 gray yung approximate dose, and mean survival time is 10 days to 60 days. Okay? So clinical signs and symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, anemia, leukopenia, hemorrhage, fever, and infection. Okay? Then gastrointestinal, 10 to 50. Then day of survival, 4 to 10 days. Okay? Clinical signs and symptoms, in addition to the hematologic signs and symptoms. So mayroong electrolyte imbalance, lethargy, okay? Fatigue and shock. Then more than 50 gray. 0 to 3 days ang kanyang mean survival time. Same as the gastrointestinal, clinical signs and symptoms. Then plus ataxia, edema and system vasculitis, and meningitis. Okay. So prodromal period, this is the immediate response of radiation sickness. Okay, more than 100 rad, mean survival time, wala. So yan yung kanyang clinical signs and symptoms. So this immediate response of radiation sickness is the prodromal period. Then latent period, the time after exposure during which there is no sign of radiation sickness. Okay? Ito yung time na uh, after the experience of prodromal, biglang mawawala ng signs and symptoms, and this period is called latent period. Okay. So it extends from hours or less at doses in excess of 50 gray, 2 weeks at doses from 1 to 5 gray. Okay, so approximate dose, okay, 100 to 10,000 rad. Mean survival time, wala. Clinical signs and symptoms, none. Okay. So again, the latent period is the time after exposure during which there is no sign of radiation sickness. Then we go to manifest illness. Kung sa film screen may manifest image, so dito sa radiobiology, may manifest illness. So the dose necessary to produce a given syndrome and the mean survival time are the principal quantitative measure of human radiation lethality. At very high radiation doses, the latent period disappears altogether, and very low radiation doses, there may be no prodromal period at all. Okay. So sinasabi lang dito that the manifest illness ay naproproduce kapag na-reach yung certain threshold ng radiation dose. Okay. At ang sukatan daw, okay, at ang sukatan kapag nagkaroon na ng syndrome, radiation syndrome, is the mean survival time and the dose mismo. Okay? So, it is, kung mapapansin natin, the dose and the mean survival time is inversely proportional. Diba? The higher the dose, the shorter the mean survival time. Okay? Okay. And another thing is, kapag sobrang taas daw ng radiation dose, maaaring wala ng latent period. And at very low doses, maaari namang walang prodromal period na maganap. So the hematologic syndrome, it is characterized, okay, by the reduction of white cells, red cells, and platelets. So basically, coming from the term hematologic itself, so may kinalaman to sa blood. So itong syndrome na to, ayun nga, ang main characterization niya ay may reduction of blood cells and platelets. Okay. Dahil we receive certain radiation dose, okay, that can lead to the death of these cells. Okay, so the radiation dose can lead to the death of the blood cells. Okay. Appear in a matter of few hours to several days. Okay. So approximate dose niya ay 2 gray to 10 gray or 200 to 1,000 rad. So that is yung bukod sa approximate niya, okay, approximate niya na, but the threshold is 200 rad or 2 gray. Then mean survival time is 10 to 60 days. Okay, so inulit lang dito yung clinical signs and symptoms. Okay, so ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. Okay. So hematologic syndrome, prodromal period, mild symptoms. Matter of a few hours, yung prodromal period ay mangyayari. Then after the prodromal period, so a latent period will transpire. So general feeling of wellness. Then after that, the period of manifest illness will happen. Okay? Producing the following signs and symptoms: vomiting, mild diarrhea, malaise, lethargy, and fever. Recovery period is from 2 to 4 weeks to 6 months. Full recovery. Okay? So, may full recovery pa kapag dyan pa lang sa hematologic syndrome ang nangyari. Okay? Pwede pang makabawi. Okay? However, pwede rin siyang mag-lead to death. Okay. So, ano yung magiging cause of death niya? General infection, kay electrolyte imbalance and dehydration. Okay? Then, gastrointestinal syndrome. So, mas tumaas na yung dose. So, this occurs principally because of the severe damage to the cells lining the intestines. Okay? So, bakit gastrointestinal yung kasunod? Okay? Because our cells, the lining cells in the intestines are reproduced ano ba? Kumbaga days, mabilis siya mapalitan or mabilis yung reproduction ng cells lining the intestines. So, as we all know that young cells are radiosensitive. So, during the process of cell division, so nagkakaroon na agad ng cell injury or cell death. Kapag cell injury, yung function ng cell ay mababaliwala. Kapag cell death, syempre, there's no action talaga ng cell. Okay? Approximate dose, 10 to 50 gray or 1,000 to 5,000 rad. Threshold is 10 gray or 1,000 rad. Okay? Mean survival time is 4 to 10 days. Okay. So yan, intestinal cells are normally in a rapid state of proliferation. Mabilis yung kanyang division. Okay? Kaya Kaya nga, di ba, kapag ikaw ay may colon cancer or intestinal cancer, ang bilis lang bago ma-dead ang isang tao. Diba? Example, si Cory Aquino, in a matter of several months, since na-diagnose siya ng colon cancer, ayun, namatay agad. Okay? And that is also relevant in the gastrointestinal syndrome because yun nga, young cells or immature cells are radio sensitive. So turnover time for this cell renewal is 3 to 5 days. About 3 to 5 days compared to the RBC na 120 days. Then prodromal period for the gastrointestinal syndrome. So vomiting and diarrhea occurs within hours of exposure or within a day. Then latent period, 3 to 5 days with no symptoms present or walang nararamdaman. Then period of manifest, second wave of nausea and vomiting, followed by diarrhea and anorexia. Then cause of death, unprevented rapid progression of symptoms, 4 to 10 days of exposure. Okay? So, as you can see, wala siyang recovery period. Unlike sa hematologic. Hematologic period, there is still room for recovery. But when the dose received ay umabot na sa gastrointestinal syndrome, there is no more room for recovery. Okay? Okay, so same nung nasa table. Okay, so punta tayo dito. Prodromal period niya, severe nausea and vomiting ang signs and symptoms. Okay, then latent period, walang days specified, walang period specified, but the symptoms in the prodromal period will disappear. Okay, period of manifest illness. Okay, more severe prodromal syndrome, disorientedness, lost muscle coordination, dyspnea, convulsive seizures, loss of equilibrium, ataxia, and lethargy. So outcome, of course, death within a few days of exposure. Kasi po, central nervous system na yung kanyang syndrome. So, it is ultimate cause of elevated fluid content of the brain. Okay? So, regardless of the medical attention given to the patient, the symptoms of manifest illness appear rather suddenly and always with extreme severity. So, doon sa pagdating sa manifest illness period, kahit na ano alaga sa pasyente ng healthcare provider, okay, or ng healthcare professional, ay palaging biglaan at mas severe compared sa prodromal period yung signs and symptoms na ma-experience ng pasyente. Okay. So yung CNS, so siya ay binanggit kanina, di ba? Increase ng fluid pressure. So increase of intracranial pressure, inflammatory changes in the blood vessel of the brain or vasculitis, and inflammation of the meninges or meningitis. So yan yung nagkakarakterize sa CNS syndrome under the acute radiation syndrome. So again, the outcome of CNS syndrome is of course always death within a few days after the exposure. Okay? So yan yung reason niya. Yung pinaka-reason kung bakit death ang magiging outcome ng CNS syndrome. Kapag increase ang fluid content, magkakaroon ng increased intracranial pressure. At kapag nagkaroon ng increased intracranial pressure, magkakaroon ng vasculitis, pamamaga ng mga vessels sa brain, and at the same time, pamamaga ng mga meninges. Okay? And that will lead to death. Okay. Next is the LD5060. Okay. So LD means lethal dose. So this is the dose of radiation to the whole body that causes 50% of irradiated subjects to die within 60 days. Yan. Okay? So yan yung ibig sabihin ng LD5060. Ito daw yung radiation dose na kailangan para radiation dose na kailangan na ma-expose ang whole body or buong katawan para mag-cause ng kalahati ng mga inexposed sa radiation para mamatay within 60 days. Okay. It quantitatively measured the acute radiation lethality. So ito daw yung measured or quantitative measurement ng acute radiation lethality. And sa ating humans, the LD5060 is 350 rad. Okay. Well, halimbawa, explain lang natin furthermore yung LD5060. So, ilang kayo sa klase? Let's say you are 24. So, lahat kayo na-expose sa radiation. Umabot ng 350 rad. Sabi dito, 50% ninyo, kalahati ninyo, mamamatay within 60 days. So, ibig sabihin, 24, 50% nun is 12. So, 12 of you will die within 60 days. If you are exposed to a radiation dose of 350 rad, because that is the lethal dose 5060 or LD5060. Malinaw po ba? Sure kayo kasi makaka-encounter kayo nito ng ibang LD. May LD 3070 or 3050 or 5030, 5070, yung mga ganun. So same lang yun. Basta dapat yung tatandaan yung numerator, yung nasa taas, siya yung percentage ng irradiated subject. And yung nasa baba, yung denominator, is the number of days. Okay? So ito yung LD5060. Okay. So, lethality niya 50%. Okay? So, radiation-induced death in human follows a nonlinear threshold dose-response relationship. So, nonlinear threshold dose. Okay. Bakit siya nonlinear? Because it presents a sigmoidal uh, sigmoidal graph. Threshold kasi meron siyang threshold. And ang threshold dito is 6 gray. Doon sa given image. 100% lethality, 6 gray. So 50% lethality, siya ay almost 3. Slightly bigger than 3.5 gray. Para matin yung 50% lethality. Okay? Meron siyang threshold pero siya ay nonlinear. So again, the LD5060 is the dose of radiation to the whole body that causes 50% of irradiated subjects to die within 60 days. Okay. So these are the approximate LD5060 for various species after whole body radiation exposure. Okay. Pig, dog, ayan. So 2.5 gray or 250 rad. Sa dog, 2.8. Humans, 3.5 gray or 350 rad. Guinea pig, 4.3 and so on. And syempre, ang pinakamatibay sa lahat, cockroach. Okay. 100 gray. 100 gray, grabe sa tibay. Okay. So at a lower dose of approximately 1 gray or 100 rad, no one is expected to die. Above approximately 6 rad, all those irradiated die unless vigorous medical support is available. Okay? However, kapag 350 rad or 3.5 gray, 50% lang ng irradiated humans will die within 60 days. So above 10 gray or 1,000 rad, even with vigorous medical support, does not prevent death. Kahit anong medical treatment na gawin ay same pa rin ang kalalagyan. Ay death pa rin. Kapag more than 10 gray. So if death is to occur, it usually happens within 60 days of exposure. Acute radiation lethality is measured quantitatively by the LD5060. So yun na, which is approximately 3.5 gray or 350 rad for humans. Okay. So for humans, with clinical support, humans can tolerate much higher doses, and the maximum reported is 8.5 gray or 850 rad. So pwede pa daw mag-survive. However, kapag ito ay lumampas ng 8.5, lumampas ng 10 gray, so kahit may clinical support or medical support, hindi na magso-survive ang pasyente, and the patient will die within 60 days. Okay. Then, anong meaning ng mean survival? Okay, mean, syempre average. It is the average time between exposure and death. So, Yan. As the whole body radiation dose increases, the average time between exposure and death decreases, so inversely proportional. Binanggit na nga natin kanina. Okay? So as the radiation dose increases from 2 to 10 gray or 200 to 1000 watt, the mean survival time decreases from approximately 60 to 40 days. Sorry, 60 to 4 days. Okay? So, ayan. Ito yung dapat pangtandaan doon sa tatlong syndrome. Okay? Hematologic syndrome is dose-dependent. GI syndrome is they remain constant kahit na uh, mataas yung dose o di gaano mataas yung dose basta umabot doon sa threshold. So, yun na yun. While CNS is also dose-dependent. The higher the dose, okay, the higher the possibility na mag-lead to death. Okay? So, now we go to the local tissue damage. So, tapos na tayo doon sa whole body. Whole body yung may LD 50-60, okay? So, local tissue damage naman tayo. When only part of the body is irradiated, in contrast with the whole body irradiation, a higher dose is required to produce a response. So yun, habang ina-explain ko kanina yung sa my skin erythema and in contrast with the acute radiation syndrome, so yun na binanggit ko na mas mataas na dose ang kailangan kapag small area lang yung or small region of interest lang yung irradiated to produce a biologic response. So every organ and tissue of the body can be affected by partial body irradiation or attenuation. The effect of cell death, which results in the okay, so the effect of cell death which results to the atrophy of the organ or tissue. Okay? This effect can lead to a total lack of function. Siyempre kapag nag-atrophy na o lumiit na ang certain organ or anatomical structure, so it loses its function. Diba? Kapag ang muscle natin lumiit, nag-atrophies, so it loses its function. Nagiging siyang mahina. Same with our tissues and organs. Okay? Then local tissue damage, it follows also the threshold type dose response relationship curve. Okay? So characteristic, deterministic in response also. Kasi nga may threshold. Okay? Again, bakit siya deterministic? Kasi it is the threshold that determines the response. Kapag na-reach yung threshold, may response. Kapag hindi na-reach yung threshold, walang response. So therefore, the threshold determines if there will be human response or biological response. Okay? So, local tissues can be affected immediately. So ito yung mga tatlong local tissues. Skin, gonads, and bone marrow. Okay? Okay, so partial irradiation, a higher dose is required to produce a response. Kasi nga, small lang yung region of interest. It affects organs and tissues. Effect niya is cell death that results to atrophy of organs or tissue. Okay? Atrophy is the shrinkage of an organ tissue due to cell death. Okay, pagliit ng muscle, tissue, or organ due to cell death. Then effect on skin. So skin, So it is the tissue which we had the most experience of exposure. Okay? So meron siyang 3 layers. Balikan natin ng konti ang anatomy niya. The epidermis, the outer layer, then the basal cell, it is the lowest layer of the epidermis. Then after the epidermis, we have the dermis, okay, and the subcutaneous layer. Other accessory structures include cell follicles, sweat glands, and sensory receptors. Okay? So cells replacement rate niya ay 2% per day. Samantalang yung sa GI tract natin ay 50% per day. So compare mo kung gaano kabilis. So sobrang bilis no sa GI tract. Okay, and then skin effect niya ay nonlinear threshold dose response relationship din. Katulad ng sa local tissues. Okay? So, bakit with threshold? Kasi nga, wala namang mangyayaring effect kung walang threshold. Or hindi magkakaroon halimbawa ng skin erythema kung hindi ma-reach yung certain dose threshold. So it is also a dose or threshold dose response relationship. Okay, so basal cell. Bakit siningle out yung basal cells? Okay, so if I remember correctly, merong isa sa inyo na nagtangkang gawing thesis yung basal cell carcinoma something. Okay? So, basal cells, okay? So the stem cells that mature as they migrate to the surface of the epidermis. So, ibig sabihin, yung basal cell ay isang uri ng stem cell. Kapag nagmamature ang basal cell, sila ay napupunta sa ibabaw. Okay? So damage to the basal cells results in the earliest manifestation of radiation injury to the skin. In earlier times, the tolerance of the patient's skin is determined by the limitation of radiation oncology with orthovoltage X-rays. Orthovoltage X-rays have 200 to 300 kbp. Okay. So yun na, so kapag na-expose ang stem cell, di ba? Stem cells are also radiosensitive. So therefore, magkakaroon ng effect. Kapag ang isang cell ay radiosensitive, it can produce or it will produce effects more surely than a mature cell. Okay? So yan. As you can see, basal cell, nasa pagitan siya ng epidermis at dermis. Or basically, the basal cells are the last layer of epidermis. As the cells mature, so ayun, ano lang siya, mag-move up lang siya. And then, a new line of basal cells will grow dun sa kung saan sila nandun. Yung layer na yon. So it is the most sensitive or it is the most radiosensitive layer of the skin. The basal cell layer. Okay? Because, again, stem cells are radio sensitive. because stem cells are rapidly producing. Okay, so yan. Ito yung mga pwedeng mangyari sa skin natin. Okay, first wave, erythema, redness of the skin, a sunburn-like reddening of the skin. Okay, the first observed biologic response to radiation exposure. To radiation exposure dose of 3 to 10 gray. Okay, usually it can be observed on the first or second day. Okay, next is moist desquamization. Okay, second wave yan. So the clinical tolerance for radiation therapy. So hanggang dyan, kapag may nakitang redness during radiation therapy, so it is acceptable. Then, kapag may observance ng moist desquamization, acceptable pa rin siya. However, kapag meron ng desquamization mismo, so third level, third wave pala, hindi na siya o hindi na itutuloy yung radiation therapy. Ititigil muna. Bakit? Kasi may ulceration na. May ulceration na ng skin. Ibig sabihin may damage na ng skin. Okay? Meron na ang sugat. Okay? Kaya nga, we have two methods used in delivering radiation therapy. Okay. Diba tapos na kayo sa radiation therapy? Ano yung two methods used in delivering radiation dose in radiation therapy? Ano yung two methods used? Risalia, alam mo ba yung dalawang methods used in delivery of radiation dose sa radiation therapy? Risalia, are you there? Limot na. Kailan lang yung radiation therapy? Last sem lang. Sinong may alam? Dalawa lang yun. Halos magkatunog. Joseph, do you know? Ba't hindi nyo gamitin ng mic nyo para kayong sira?
Sir, nakalimutan ko po wait lang.
Limot din. Clue. Sounds alike. Parehas magkatunog. May Sean. Sean ang last sound. Sean. Sino pa ba? Tawag pa tayo. Cheriel. Cheche. Ayan na, naglilib na kapag nagtatanungan na. Cheriel, are you there? Ayan. Kasi patay ang mga camera nyo. Yung pala yung iba sa inyo tulog. Bahala kayo. Hindi kayo nakikinig. Sino pa? Oh, Euclid, do you know? Alam mo ba kung ano sagot?
Ano po ba external and internal radiation?
Parehas. Method of delivering radiation dose in radiation therapy. Method in computing radiation dose.
Protraction and fractionation po.
Ayun. Protraction and fractionation. Okay. So during radiation therapy, the skin is exposed accordingly to a fractionated skin. So usually 2 gray per day. Okay, 5 days a week. Okay. So the rationale behind it is to assist the radiation oncologist, okay, to planning patient treatment. So another question, dahil nagtera na kayo, bakit 5 days lang ang radiation therapy? Bakit 5 days a week lang? Ba nakalagay dyan, no? 5 days a week. Bakit 5 days a week lang? Remember M, remember E. Put them together, remember me. Ano na eh? So bakit? Bakit 5 days lang a week sinasagawa ang radiation therapy? Bakit hindi pwedeng 6 days? O ba't hindi pwedeng 7 days a week? Nako, very important pa naman yan. So may sasagot ba? Jello? O sino? Sige.
Kasi po sa radiation therapy, ang ginagawa po ay pinapatay po yung mga dito. Yung mga
Anong high?
kumbaga yung
High.
proliferation na rin po na cell.
Which is cancer cells.
Maraming activity. Opo.
Oh.
Yung cancer cell. Tapos kaya po may din may agwat. Kumbaga may pahinga. Para po makarecover yung mga healthy cells. Kumbaga po parang hindi po sila
Bakit kailangan mag-recover ang healthy cell? Eh sabi mo ang tinitira lang sa radiation therapy ay yung mga high proliferating cells.
hindi naman po sa may iwasan na may matamaan.
Ayun. Yun pala yun. So tama, no? Kailangan ng 2 days. Yung 2 days ay basically for cell recovery. Cell recovery ng mga healthy cells. So, tama si Kat na dahil hindi naman totally masisigurado na during radiation therapy, ang tatamaan lang ay yung mga cancer cells. And even sure tayo na ang tatamaan lang ay yung mga cancer cells, diba we have what we call indirect effect ng radiation. So, pwedeng maging source ng scatter radiation yung mga cancer cells that can affect the healthy cells around the cancer cells. Kaya 2 days lang. So usually tinatanong yan sa mga radiation therapy facility. Kaya wag niyong kakalimutan yung rationale na yun. Kasi sa mga hospitals, Sunday and Saturday, sarado ang radiation therapy unit. Okay. So whether the intermediate dose radiation dose produce erythema depends on the individual's radiosensitivity. Okay. So skin erythema dose required to affect 50% of the irradiated. So ayan, meron na naman. SED 50. The SED 50 is equivalent to 5 gray or 500. Okay? In order for skin erythema to manifest to 50% of the total irradiated subjects. 50 gray, 500 rad or 5 gray ang kailangan na dose. Okay. So again, meron na tayong LD 50-60, meron tayong SED 50. Okay. Then X-ray induced erythema. Okay. So one of the hazards to the patient of early radiology. Okay. Then we have alopecia or hair loss. Okay. So naulit lang yung SED 50. Then Gren's rays. So it is used to treat Tinea capitis or ringworm. So ang range niya ay 10 to 20 kbp. Okay? So yan ay radiation used to treat ringworms. Ringworms or bony. Okay. So ito yung potential radiation response of skin from high-dose fluoroscopy. Okay? So we have the potential radiation response, the dose threshold, and approximate time of onset. So early transient erythema, 200 rad or 2 gray, hours lang ang kanyang onset. Then main erythema is 600 rad, 6 gray, 10 days. Temporary epilation, temporary hair loss, 300 rad, 3 gray, onset niya ay 3 weeks. Permanent epilation, 7 rad, so 7 gray, 3 weeks din. And moist desquamization, 1,050 rad or 15 gray, 4 weeks ang kanyang onset. Okay. So yan ay potential lang naman. Potential radiation response. It may happen or it may not happen. Then effects on the gonads. So it's 445. Testes. Okay. Male gonads produces the spermatogonia and it matures into sperm. So spermatogonia yung immature cell, then magiging siyang spermatid. Okay? Mature na yon. Then ovaries, female gonads, produces the oogonia and ovum. Okay? So these are the main gonads for both sexes. Then germ cell, okay, produced by both ovaries and testes. Gametogenesis is the process of development of germ cell. Okay? Gametogenesis. So progression of germ cell. Okay. So male, so from spermatogonia, which is the most radiosensitive because it is the youngest uh, form of germ cell, male germ cell. Then magiging siyang spermatocyte. Then magiging siyang spermatid. And magiging siyang sperm. And for female, una siya ay primordial follicle. Ibig sabihin, nandun pa lang siya sa kumbaga bago pa lang siya magkakaroon ng tawag dito, o bago pa lang siya magkakaroon ng bunga. Okay? Tapos magmamature siya, mature follicle, and the mature follicle is the most sensitive, radiosensitive. Then after that, magiging siyang corpus luteum, and then the corpus luteum will become an ovum. So yan. So from oogonia, which is the germ cell, okay, then primordial follicle, mature follicle, corpus luteum, and then magiging siyang ovum. Okay, sa male spermatogonia, spermatocyte, spermatid, and sperm. Okay, so yan yung process of or the development or the gametogenesis of germ cell for both male and female germ cell. Okay, so most radiosensitive for male germ cell is spermatogonia, and for female germ cell it is the mature follicle. Okay. Okay. So oogonia, stem cells of the ovaries. Okay, they multiply in number only before birth and during fetal life. So meaning kapag after birth and after the fetal life, so siya ay isang oogonia lang, tapos magiging isang follicle, then isang corpus luteum, and then isang mature ovum. So the primordial follicles will grow, will become the oogonia. Ay, baliktad. So the oogonia will grow, tapos magkakaroon ng encapsulation do sa oogonia. Okay, after the encapsulation, so they will become or they will be called primordial follicles. Okay, then oocyte or yung corpus, ano yun? Something, nalimutan ko. Yan, corpus luteum. Okay? So oocyte is a matured oogonia, and ovum is the mature female germ cell. So before maging ovum is corpus luteum muna siya. So usually during ultrasound, during TBS, or yung tinatawag na follicle monitoring ng mga OB-GYN, tinitingnan dun yung ovaries, tinitingnan kung may presence ng follicles and corpus luteum. Okay? Okay, so fertilization to 400 to 500 ova, the number of years of menstruation times 13 per year. So ito naman yung sa male germ cell. So stem cells of the testis continually being produced from stem cells progressively through a number of stage to maturity. Then spermatocyte is a mature spermatogonia. Spermatid is a mature spermatocyte. And spermatozoa or sperm is a mature male germ cell. Okay? So malinaw naman yung mga definition niya. So maturation, 3 to 5 weeks. Okay? So ovaries. Irradiation causes. It causes in the early life atrophy o pagliit ng ovaries. After puberty, so suppression and delay of menstruation ang pwedeng maging cause ng exposure ng ovaries sa radiation. Okay? So 10 rad is enough to suppress menstruation. Then 25 to 50 rad can increase genetic mutation. So it will affect the future generation. Then 200 rad, temporary sterility. 500 rad is permanent sterility. Okay? Pagkabaog, tuluyang pagkabaog. Panandali ang pagkabaog, 200 rad. 500 rad, baog ka na talaga. Okay? So the most radiosensitive cell during female germ cell development is the oocyte in the mature follicle. Okay, so ito yung sinabi na kanina. Okay. Testes naman. So irradiation can cause atrophy. Kung nalalakihan kasi yung testis, expose natin sa radiation para lumiit. Joke lang. Okay? So 10 rad or 100 milligray reduces the number of spermatozoa. 200 rad temporarily or temporary sterility. So approximately 2 months after irradiation. So meaning 2 months kang sterile, hindi ka makakabuntis 2 months. Or it can go longer than 12 months or 1 year. So 2 months to 12 months in temporary sterility. Okay? And then 500 rad sterility. Okay, so permanent sterility 500 rad. So spermatogonia. okay, is the most sensitive phase in the gametogenesis of the spermatozoa. So, nabanggit natin yan kanina. So, male gametogenesis is self-renewing system. So, meaning, patuloy siyang nangyayari, spontaneous. Para siyang radioactivity. Okay? Continuous yung gametogenesis ng male every day. Okay? So, summary table ng dose and response sa gonads. Okay? Then, hematologic effects. Okay? So, I think we will stop here in hematologic effects and we will continue next meeting. Okay?